Welcome to the Female Finance Collective, where we encourage women to have open and honest conversations about all things money. In today's episode, we're going to be chatting about ways to invest in your future and all kinds of ways to save for retirement and long-term future planning. Quick disclaimer before we get started. Today's episode is all about investing and saving, and this is really just for educational and conversational purposes, not specific advice. We're here to share our ideas and what works for us. So we're going to start talking about savings for the future and answer a few basic questions for you. We're going to talk about where your money comes from in retirement, how much money you need, and when to start investing. And so who wants to start us off and kind of start sharing their best tips for getting started for saving for your future?
I can go first.
Okay, great.
And retirement saving and planning is one of those topics that is so future oriented that it's very difficult to understand what you need to do today to be able to have a good retirement and be able to meet some of those goals that you have for that retirement. So the first question that a lot of people have is, where will our money come from in retirement? So it's a good idea to have a look at your finances and just understand what the big categories of income will be in your retirement. So for most people, if they've been employed in a salaried job, they will have some sort of government pension. So that will be one source of income. Another source of income could be if your employer has a savings plan that you can participate in and that they contribute to. That is often a big source of income in retirement. And nowadays, most people are also saving for retirement on their own. So, they have different retirement type of accounts or even savings accounts where they're putting money away for their future. And other people might have rental income or some other recurring income that they can depend on during their retirement. And other people may start a business. So they may have some active business income that they can have throughout their retirement years. So those tend to be the big categories. So it's sitting down and thinking through what might apply to you in your retirement and start researching what those numbers could look like. It's a big project. It's hard to know, in 20 or 30 years what your life might look like, but you can actually start doing a little planning and dreaming on what types of things you might want to do in retirement. What travel might look like, where you will live, some of those big decisions that determine how much you need to have as an annual income for retirement.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking that, for the first step for me really was that of trying to conceptualize and understand how much money I'm going to need in retirement, right? And how long my retirement's going to be. So how much money do I need to make sure is invested so that I can pull out money to live the comfortable lifestyle I want to live. And considering, will you still want to be doing, a side job or, a lot of people do side gigs these days during retirement, kind of that encore career, kind of that passion project, but it's bringing you in more money during your retirement too. For me, one of the biggest aha moments in answering that big question, because it's easy to get overwhelmed there. Like, I have no idea how much I'm going to need. What's inflation going to be? And I was stuck thinking it was like out of my control. Let's say that. I mean, honestly, that's what it was, this overwhelm of, I don't know how much I'm going to need. I don't know where it's going to come from. I've got a teacher retirement I'm building, but is that going to be enough? Right. And so the biggest aha for me to start to come to grips with how much I'm going to need at what age. And I'm just going with 65 because that's like the typical in the US at this point. When you can start accessing your retirement funds and such, was learning about the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And even if you don't want to retire early, it doesn't matter. What I learned from that movement was that I could actually do a mathematical equation, a simple one, to find out how much I would need to withdraw from my stocks and my retirement accounts and all the things to live the lifestyle I wanted to live. And the first thing, once I retire, so the first thing you need to do is come up with that number. So am I going to live on 75,000 a year, let's say? And then I can do the math. 75,000 times 25 years is how much I would need to have to live 25 years on, living a lifestyle that's 75,000. And then I can work backwards of how much, using an investment calculator, how much do I need to have invested at an 8 or even 6 to 10% interest rate. And then I can come up with a number, and a year, like by 65, I need to have, 1.8 million in my brokerage account or my retirement accounts, or the whole, all of my accounts that I'm going to be withdrawing from. And I could safely withdraw 4% every year after that, right? And that will last me about 25 years. There's a famous study called the Trinity study that proved that, this kind of actually easy mathematical equation works, that you can do the math that way. So that for me was my point of starting to change my perspective of overwhelm, and I just can't save for the future because I'm never going to make it, to, oh, this is obtainable, and it's because of that compound interest in these accounts that we're going to go into more detail and talk to you about over the next couple of episodes, right? So it's like, what do you want your lifestyle to be like? How much do you think you're going to need? And then it's like, do I know exactly inflation? No. But am I going to get caught up on it? No, I'm going to keep moving forward and make an investment plan, and really starting to make that plan for your financial future based off of some of that work. Like you said, Marilee, it doesn't just happen. You have to put the work in. You have to, what kind of lifestyle am I going to want to lead? What age am I going to want to start living this lifestyle, and stop the 9 to 5 or whatever it may be that you're doing to invest for your future, right?
No, and that's great, Sybil. The 4% rule is a great guideline. And for anyone that's feeling really confused and overwhelmed by that, probably the best thing to do is to work with a financial planner or advisor that can guide you on your specific numbers. They take inventory of all the different things that you have and different sources of income that you might have in retirement, and can help you run the numbers just to see if you're on track, or they can share with you how much more you need to save to get on track if you're not already there. So there is a way that you can do the math yourself, or if you want help, then you can get a financial professional to assist you with that. I think for most people, doing that around 10 years before retirement, getting really clear on the detailed numbers makes a lot of sense. But obviously, one of the biggest questions, which Jen, I'm hoping you'll be able to weigh in on this one, is when do you start to do this? When do you start to contribute towards your retirement?
All right, so now is my first answer, but as soon as you can. So if you haven't been contributing up to this point, then now is the right time. Ideally, like when you get your first job, when you very first start working, when you start having any sort of income, you learn to set aside some amount of it, even if it's a really tiny amount. You just learn that a little bit of my money every time I get paid goes towards my future, and you start saving that. But I also think it's really important for people who haven't been saving yet to not panic, because it's never too late to start. And even if the terms that we're saying, like compound interest or percentages, this one's growing this percent, this one's growing this percent, sometimes you can get in your head and you're like, whoa, that's too much to figure out. I don't know where to start, so never mind. But anything that you're saving, even if I'm not suggesting that this is the best way to save for your long-term retirement money, but even if you just start putting some money in like a high yield savings account that's paying 5%, you're still earning money on your savings, right? So if that's the first thing that feels like safe for you, then start putting money there every month. But it's never too late to start, and it's also never too early to start. When I'll just share this really quick story. When I was young, I think this was maybe a little bit of a mistake, but there's multiple goods and bads in this very short story. I first got my very first teaching job. My uncle was like, you have to put 10% into your retirement account. Just put 10% and just make that a habit and just do it. And I was like, okay. The problem was I was making very little money and I had some debt I was trying to pay off. And I was probably 10% was probably too much for me. And I would have been a little bit better off on my day-to-day living if I would have contributed a little bit less. So I found myself, my debt was getting worse. And then ultimately this is part of the story randomly, but I needed to move. I was moving states. And I was like, I need to just pay for some stuff. I need to pay things off. So I took my money out of my 401k. I paid the tax penalty because to me at the time it was worth it. It felt like it was worth it. I don't know if that was the right or wrong thing to do long term, but in the end, I paid this huge tax penalty, but I got this chunk of money and I was able to pay some things off and like pay for a move and all of that. So that story is, had I not put 10%, I probably would have been in better shape. But if I could have afforded that 10%, like imagine what that would be now, right? Because that was a lot of years ago. And then taking that money out of the retirement account helped me in the short term, but I don't know that it really helped me in the long term. So that's also something that you have to like think about. And I'm saying this story not to confuse people, but to just know that there's like so many things to consider that it's okay if it feels like a little bit overwhelming. It's okay if you're like, well, this is a lot of money or not a lot. Where do I do? But I took that money out and I still have a good amount of money in my retirement is also part of my point because I started back up as soon as I got started my next job. So there's just a lot of things to consider, and we hear that and we understand that, but just know that everybody knows all those, that there's this long list of considerations. And so just take it one step at a time. And that's kind of what that confusing story is trying to say. Like start, and then if you have to like backtrack, that's okay. And then start back up. That's really what's important, is to keep making progress. Sorry, that was
no, that is so good. I completely agree. And it reminded me, Jen, of an episode that's one of our most popular episodes on the podcast, actually. It's called Debt versus Savings. If you guys want to Google it, we talk a lot about that exact thing. Like, do I pay off my debt? Do I, save for the future? Do I, save for emergency savings? Because you're exactly right. Like, we just need to make decisions and move forward. And when it feels like a mistake, maybe, right? You have a lot of maybe it was a mistake. The no action is a wrong action, but taking no action is the problem, right? So like you said, Jen, like start investing in a high yield savings account, get used to it, get used to the emotional response of, I want to take it out to use it. Should I or not? Right. And then you can do some work within yourself. Do I need this for this move right now? This is probably the best thing. Or can I leave it? Can I leave it for the longer term retirement and maybe even start to move some of that from the 5% to something that might make more like 8%. Right. But I have a mistake too. I've talked about many times on here with my IRA and not investing it. It's okay. I learned from the mistake. Like, darn it, I could have had a lot of thousands of dollars I don't have, but I've invested it now and it's up to 5 point something percent gains. It's not at my 9% that the rest of my portfolio is at, but I took action once I realized for me that, was a mistake, truly, because when you put something, I now know, when you put any kind of money, it doesn't matter if it's a 401k or an HSA or an IRA, you got to invest it in some way. You either say your risk level, it's high risk, medium, or low, or you're actually picking the fund or the stock to invest it in. They're all just like containers, vehicles, right? But getting it into one of those vehicles, I love that idea of like getting it into that high yield savings account and then going from there. And then just paying attention to that emotional response of, should I use it? Should I save it? What are my financial plans and goals? Really what we're talking about is that continually, isn't it? Making a goal for that money, making a plan to get that money here. And then of course we're revising them because as you said, Jen, it is so complex. And that's why we have to keep asking questions, keep learning, keep listening to this podcast, right? Because I mean, the three of us get so much from this podcast every week. It's incredible having these conversations. That's really what we have to do is keep talking about it, keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
I feel like the reality check is that pretty much everyone feels confused about this topic and
Yeah.
how much to set aside. You know, as humans, we're very oriented in the present day, and it's tough to even imagine ourselves in 20 or 30 years. So, you know, the easiest thing is to just get started with something, like no matter how small that amount is. And that helps to build a habit. You can reassess it every couple of months and see if you can put more aside, but just taking the action to get started with something. And the big benefit is you're going to feel pretty awesome. Like doing that step and taking care of your future self, you're getting more future oriented. You're going to feel awesome. Like there is like this happiness and peace of mind that comes with taking a step and being an adult. And this stuff is hard to navigate for everyone. Even income people have a tough time setting money away for retirement. So usually the best practice is if you can take that off before you get paid. So whether that's through your employer or just an automated contribution, and just live off of the money that you have remaining, that's usually like the best practice to get started and to make sure that you are doing that, paying yourself first.
Yes, paying yourself first is such a game changer because it takes away the emotional spending. The money's already put into retirement. You know, I get paid on the first, my money goes to my retirement accounts on the second. I live the third through 30th on what I have left because I paid myself first. So I don't get to make a choice. Do I want to invest for my future? Or do I want to spend for right now? For me, that was a game changer too, of automating it right after payday, because then it's like, I didn't make a choice each month. Oh, I'm tight this month. I shouldn't invest so much, right? And you can change those automations if you need to, but it's a process. So you're going to stop and think, do I really want to change it to less or to a different date? Things like that. Yeah. And I love, Jen, you also kind of brought this up too. And I'll talk about this a lot more in the next episode. But just starting small, $1 a day. And I'm going to share with you in our next episode a way that I've done that using a robo advisor. Because like we're all saying the same thing here, just start, right? Make a plan to start, keep doing it, and then revise that plan. And it does feel good, doesn't it, Marilee? Like it's exciting to feel like you have enough understanding and knowledge and you're taking action. So you're moving forward. That is a really relieving thing. And I'm not saying that it doesn't get scary and big, you know, at times too, and overwhelming, because it absolutely does. It continues. But when the overall becomes, I can do it, I'm doing it, I see the proof, I'm planning for my future, it really is a really great feeling inside to begin to have it, because I think you can build empathy. Empathy is a skill that we can learn, and we can build empathy for our future selves as well. It's hard, but once you start seeing your progress and you start focusing on, I'm doing this for me, I'm taking care of myself by planning for my future. I don't want to have to work until I die. I need to, you know, come to grips with that and move forward with that. And we can learn to do that with, you know, a collection of knowledge and understanding, but the action, I think, is the biggest piece of actually doing it.
And I think too, one of the things that both of you have mentioned this in different ways, but if you're having a hard time saving for your future self, or if you're having a hard time thinking about future versus your wants and desires and needs now, One of the things, my husband, I think I've mentioned this before, but we went to this like financial kind of wealth building workshop. It was really interesting. Some of those are real sketchy. This one was not. It was just a bunch of different people sharing what they do. They weren't trying to sell us anything or anything like that. And one of the things they had us do was a future plan. And I really recommend this if you're, no matter how old you are or young you are, they had us set like, okay, in our like wildest dreams, in our wildest dreams, what would we be doing every month? What would we be spending our money on? Would we be going on once a month vacations? We're talking like once you stop working. Would we be vacationing every month? Would we have like multiple homes that we were going, like wildest dreams, right? And then after wildest dreams, it was like, okay, what's one level down from that? So maybe you don't have a vacation home, but you're still traveling like every other month, like whatever it is for you. Some people don't like to travel, so that would be terrible on their list. But that kind of like, it was like, oh, I think they called it ultimate financial freedom. And then financial freedom was like the step down. And then there was like, what would you need to just maintain what you're doing now? So we kind of planned that out, right? And then we put dollar figures to it. And some of that's guessing, right? But we kind of put dollar figures to it. So for that ultimate financial freedom, this is how much money we would need. For just the financial freedom, which would be awesome, this is how much we need. And then if we were just going to live the same life we're living now in retirement, this is about how much we would need. And once we started doing that math and we were like, oh, crud, we really need to put a little more, because living like we're living now, not exactly torture, right? We have a very lovely life. I have no complaints. But wouldn't it be great is if when we could do financial freedom or ultimate financial freedom? So that motivated us a little bit to start saving a little more, thinking about our money in a different way. And so if you're having a hard time just saying like, oh, I need to like make the decision to start saving, maybe something like that is a good way to just kind of get yourself thinking about your future you and how you want to be able to spend your money. And that made it easier for us to save more money now. Not all the time. I'm not going to pretend like it's always easy to like watch that money go away. But in the end, I'm like, oh, that's right. In 10 years from now, when you're on like this really amazing vacation, you're going to be super grateful that you saved that extra $500 or whatever. So that's one thing that you might be able to do. And then I want to also make sure that we talk about different ways to save, because I just really randomly mentioned like putting money in. I think Marilee mentioned some ways too, but just like getting started with a savings account, if that's like the only thing that feels safe to you. But what are some other ways that people, if they don't have like a 401k at work or a retirement pension, like for our Canadian friends or wherever, if you don't have like a work plan that's like really easy to just dedicate some money to, what are some other ways that people can start saving that they can kind of like take charge of? Marilee, you have some ideas?
I can jump in. So I'm from Canada. So the two main ways outside of employer plans and our pension, Canadian pension system, would be to look at our RRSP accounts, so registered retirement savings plans. There are some rules on how much you can contribute based on your income. So that is one way. The other way is the tax-free savings account. So that one, there is an annual limit. It's based on, how long you've resided in Canada since those accounts have come into fruition. So you are able to check your limits online just to make sure that you're not contributing over that. But those are two great ways to put some money away for retirement, where what you are earning day to day is either tax deferred with the case of the RRSP, or completely tax-free with the TFSA. And those are just the containers or cookie jars. So those are the accounts. And then you're able to put different investments inside of those jars. And that can range from things that are very conservative, like a high interest savings account, or a guaranteed investment, like a GIC, all the way to specific stocks or ETFs. So you are able to put a lot of different types of investments inside of there, just depending on your risk and what your goals are. So definitely lots of decisions to make along the way, but it is possible to fund a portion of your retirement from your own resources. And for most people, that's either going to be necessary or it will be the difference maker in what their retirement looks like. So if you want to do extended travel, if you want to do a lot of sports that are more expensive, then definitely there will be some money that you're probably going to need to set aside. And Jen, I wanted to mention that exercise that you spoke about, that is really, really powerful work to do. And I kind of think about it as like sometimes when people are starting to think about their future and retirement, it's almost like shaking a snow globe. We get so fixed on what our life looks like now. It's, giving the snow globe a shake and thinking about like, what else could I do? Like, how can I plan my life out to be different? Because your life isn't going to be different if you do the same things over and over again. So it's really taking the time to think about what is important to you. I know when I did that work, I realized how much money was going to stuff that I did not care about. And it's made a huge difference to direct that money to what I do care about and what is important. And part of that is retirement and having more comfort later in life where I might not have the same energy, maybe not the same health, and I want to do some different things that cost money. So and I think Sybil was going to share on the US side some of those ideas for where to put money that you're saving yourself towards retirement.
Yeah, I love the snow globe. I'm gonna remember that. Because it's like it's shake up time. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So we'll get into the details of what Marilee just shared and what I'm about to tell you in a nutshell in our next episode. This is a two-parter. So in the US, you have a lot of shaking up and choices and options as well. In the US, I would say we pretty much have to invest into our employer or into our, other accounts that we might open because we don't have such a thing as pensions here in the US. I actually have a little pension in Belgium from the time I lived there, so I get that a little bit. But in the US, we don't have this, but some companies do match. Which is definitely something you'd want to take care of. So if your company does have a 401k or a 403b or some of these different retirement options, that's definitely one way you can go. And then if your company matches, like take advantage of that's free money, right? Like they're going to give you money to that account. For example, my husband's company gives money to our HSA. They give $6,000 a year to it. And so we wouldn't want to not take that opportunity, right? Because that's just like $6,000 more on his salary, really. But even better because an HSA is triple tax advantage. We can talk about that next episode. But some other things, if your company doesn't offer a 401k or if you want to shake things up and look into other options, there's traditional IRAs and there's Roth IRAs. They both have different tax implications. So you can look into one's pre-tax, one's post-tax savings. So you can look into which would make sense for you or legally which you are allowed to do at this point in time. There's Social Security in the US, and so maybe that's a kind of equivalent to our pension, but it's very different than a Canadian pension or a Belgian pension. But then there's like if you're in the teaching sector, like I was in Colorado, we have para, different states have different things, but that's because we don't contribute to Social Security that we have those options to invest into. There's HSAs, like I earlier said, and then there's just traditional brokerage accounts. So like we have a brokerage account when we lived overseas, we couldn't invest into IRAs. So we opened a traditional, just a regular brokerage account through Vanguard. There's robo-advisors. I'll talk to you more about that in the next episode that you can invest through and in, right? And like you said, Marilee, they're all vehicles. Then you have to make the decisions of how and where your money gets invested depending on that vehicle allowances or ways you can do it, whether it's risk level or actual stocks or index funds or mutual funds, things like that. So those are the ones that came to mind for me. And like I said, we're going to talk about our next episode. It's going to go in depth about some of these different vehicles that you can retire into. So make sure that you listen in to that next episode. We'll go much more in depth. This episode was really about like why we should invest in our future, how we might invest in our future, and just get our brains thinking. Yeah, this is challenging. Yeah, this is work, but it's worth it. It's worth it work. You will be grateful, as Jen said, in your future if you can start doing this work now. So thank you so much for watching or listening today's conversation. Be sure to like and subscribe, follow us. We loved chatting with you all about retirement and thinking and saving for our future. So we'll see you next time.